Hi, I'm Phil Noble with Envision South Carolina, and we're here with the College of Charleston with Kerri Forrest, a woman who's very young but got a long career in broadcast media. Welcome.
Thank you.
You were born and raised, grew up here in Charleston?
I did. I grew up here in Charleston on James Island, Bishop England High School, and then left to go to Clemson University in 1990.
And after Clemson, where'd you go?
After Clemson, which I usually say it's a long, strange story from my time as a pre-med student, I jumped into media in college as a DJ at WSBF.
Oh, really?
I did.
You were a DJ.
And got bitten by the media bug, and when I graduated from Clemson, decided it was time to go to Washington and figure out if that was really the career for me. So I started with NBC News as a page in the Washington Bureau, which is delivering mail, making copies, answering telephones, and learning everything that I could about the television business.
And you never looked back?
Never looked back. It was a fantastic 16-year career, 14 of those years within the NBC family with the Today Show. I worked with MSNBC in a number of their political shows, and then went back to the network and worked as a White House producer for my remaining 4 years there before I moved to CBS News. And I was the senior producer for the CBS Early Show for 2 years, from 2008 to 2010.
That's an amazing sort of quick rise for a scrawny kid from James Island, by way of Clemson of all places.
I know. I look back at it some days and I'm like, wow, how did I do that?
Was pretty amazing.
But it was fun. I always said life was too short to work a job I couldn't stand, and for 16 years I loved work. I loved doing what I did there.
Did you burn out?
Yes, yes. Burnt out. I had to move home for some family issues as well, but really burnt out after jumping on and off of airplanes and following presidents and working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. After a while, you sort of stand up and go, okay, I give.
People, it is a wonderful and glamorous life, but 98% of the people in the world don't understand just how grueling it is.
No.
I mean, it can destroy you sort of physically, emotionally, mentally, every other way. I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, I always tease, I worked for MSNBC from 1996 and I helped launch the network. I was a researcher, booker in our daytime booking unit, and then I moved on from there to a number of the political talk shows. And I worked for MSNBC from 1996 to 2004, 2005. And cable should be counted in dog years, because
right.
it is so much crazier. Yeah. I mean, most network broadcasts, you come in at 9 a.m. to work towards nightly news or evening news or what have you, and at 7:30, when the shows are off and the West Coast airs are done, you go home. Cable, your 9 o'clock crisis is you have to find something for 10 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock you have to find something for noon, and at noon, and that's every day. And that's not including breaking news. And everything is breaking news because you have to feed that cable beast. Right. So
feed the beast.
You have to feed the beast, and after doing all of that, I jumped into White House producing with President Bush's last 4 years as an NBC producer, and I got to see more of the world than I ever thought that I would get to be able to say I was there. I've been to China, I've been to Vietnam, I've been to Australia, I've been to South America. I could go on and on and on. The only thing that most people don't realize is that I touched down there, I got on a bus, I went to a workspace, I covered a news conference, I got back to the workspace, I filed a report, got back on the bus, and got back on a plane. So it's
right.
It's not sightseeing. It's not like I could tell you the ins and outs of a vacation in any one of those countries. So it's a lot of hours, it's a lot of work.
A friend of mine, and you'll appreciate this, he gave me a tip, and he said, when you go to hotels, when you're involved in that kind of lifestyle, which I sort of was for a short amount of time, he said, first thing you do is find a book of matches and put it in your pocket. So you can figure out where you are, where your hotel is, and where you left your bag.
That's great. I'm going to remember to tell my friends that.
You just put them, it's sort of your little security blanket, and then when you get back from the trip, you put them in a big bowl, and then you keep your life by matches.
Right.
So talk just a little bit about what a producer in news does. Most people sort of see you know, Chris Matthews or somebody in front of the camera, and they don't quite realize, okay, if there's not a cameraman and the guy in front, what else is there?
Right. Well, you know, producer roles can be a number of things. As a producer for, say, Chris Matthews, it's writing scripts. Or for Chris, you don't write his scripts, you just give him some talking points and, and you hope that somewhere in there it gets out. But also doing the background research to support those talking points. Here's what you want to cover in this 3-minute interview. There are other producers who do logistics. Part of my time with the White House was running logistics for the White House pool. What most people don't also understand is that the networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and Fox, pool their resources to cover what the president does every day because it would be too expensive to send 5 cameras to everything every day. Right. So there's a rotating responsibility to go in and make sure that all of the technical capabilities are ready for that setup, or in the case that you know, one network is covering and everybody else stays home, that information makes it back to all of the other networks. So there's a variety of things. As a nightly news producer, I was tasked with not only making sure that David Gregory and Kelly O'Donnell and John Yang got their research material, suggested questions, and wrote their scripts. Again, NBC producers do most of the background research, and their correspondents actually write their scripts. Right. But I was also responsible for editing the pieces that you see on TV news every night. So sitting with an editor and picking the pictures that go with the words to make a complete piece. So it's a lot of different skill sets, and some people stay on one path or one track through their entire TV career. I enjoyed the process of learning, so I was always like, well, how do I do that? I want to try that for a while, and then how do I do this? You know, that looks like fun. Or then I'd get into it, like, I spent time as a line producer in a control room. I'm sure I'm going into way more than you ever wanted to know.
That's why God made editors, right?
But line producers are the people who sit in the control room, and they're telling you, you've got 3 minutes in this segment, right. Wrap it up. You know,
that's the voice in the ear.
That's the voice in the ear, exactly. Or saying, okay, I've got to go to this piece next, and then we're going to that correspondent, and then we're going to a commercial. Or in the case of the election coverage that I just did for NBC and TV1, oh my gosh, we don't have anything to go to, where are we going? So right. It's a lot of moving parts, it's a lot of information, but I enjoyed constantly learning something and being able to impart that knowledge. I felt like I was doing my part to educate the public.
And then you decided to come home.
And then I came home.
And talk about why you came home and the moving from 78 RPM to 33 RPM.
Well, actually, it's not really 33 RPM, maybe 50. 50. I stay pretty busy here. And part of my reason for moving home, as opposed to getting off the hamster wheel of television and going somewhere else, was that Charleston had finally become someplace that had enough activity and enough interest and enough social scene and enough character that I felt like I fit and that I could contribute. So moving home for me was part, I don't have to slow down to 30 miles per hour. And right. Honestly, when I left Charleston, and I've actually told the mayor this, I'm out of here, I'm done. This place is slow, I'm gone. I can't do this anymore. Right. And yet, about 7 years ago, coming back and forth to visit friends and check on my mother, and you know, I was like, it's really changed here. You know, it's a cosmopolitan city. It's actually got a pace, and it's got great music, and it's got fantastic food, and there's an art scene, and I actually could find myself living here. So I was like, what the heck, it's home. Why not do it?
So when did you permanently move back?
September of 2010.
September of 2010. Mm-hmm. So that's not long ago.
About 2 years.
As you sort of grew up here and went to Clemson and then began to see the wider world, how did you first develop some consciousness of South Carolina as different and our character and who we were and our history and legacies? And how did that ethos of becoming a South Carolinian sort of take hold with you?
You know, it's interesting. I think South Carolinians are very proud people, and I think it's just inherent. It's funny, in DC, all the South Carolinians have their little Palmetto sticker in their car. You know who all the South Carolinians are.
You do.
I mean, and it's funny because I have a friend who's from Colorado, and I got my little Palmetto sticker in my car, and he's like, "Can I have one of those?" I'm like, "You're not from South Carolina. You can't have one of those. No."
Right.
You got to own that badge. Sorry.
Right. You got to earn that.
So I think there's always been a sense, and for me, being from South Carolina has always been about history. I mean, I'm from Charleston, and my family is steeped in Charleston. And I can trace both of our lines very far back.
How far back?
My great-grandfather was a slave on the plantation, on the McLeod plantation, who was left in charge.
The one over here?
The one right across the bridge, the Wapoo-Cut Bridge. So, you know, I'm very well aware of that heritage. And he's buried under the bridge.
Do you know when he came?
Most of the African slaves in Charleston got here in the I'm not going to be able to remember the numbers. I don't know when the family line started exactly, but.
And he's buried in that little cemetery right there at the bridge?
He is.
Oh yeah, I know that well, right there behind the fire station. Yeah.
And my mother's father actually used to run a little ferry from what's now Daniel Island to the city to transport workers every day. So family history and heritage has always been something that I've been interested in, that my family's made sure that, you know, my brother and sister and I have been well aware of. So I've always been proud of being a South Carolinian because I think that my family has a very strong heritage here, and we've never been afraid of it. You know, good things happen in South Carolina, very bad things happen in South Carolina, but you have to know what your history is in order to move forward.
How do you deal with your colleagues outside of South Carolina when they see your Palmetto sticker? How does the rest of the world view South Carolina?
It's interesting because there's still a lot of people who consider South Carolina to be slow, backwards.
Right.
They think that there's still a race problem here, and I'm not saying that there isn't, but those are, you know, perceptions outside of the state. I'll characterize it the same way that a friend of mine from New Orleans does. Charleston happens to be in South Carolina, and it's very different than the rest of the state. But having said that, South Carolina has a lot of innovation here, and there's a lot of growth here, and it is a 21st century state that still needs a lot of work, but it has the potential to be a 21st century state.
Talk about that, the 21st century state, because obviously that's the theme of what this whole thing, Envision, is about. What do you see as our current assets that, I mean, I was fascinated when you said in an assertive declarative sentence, South Carolina is a 21st century state. I'm not sure I would say we are. I would say we're aspiring to be, but I find it interesting, you said we are. Do you think we are a 21st century state?
I will say Charleston is a 21st century city.
Right.
I won't, I'm maybe overqualifying only because I don't spend a lot of time outside of Charleston, inside of the state. So let me speak on behalf of Charleston. I do think Charleston is a 21st century city. And again, it is a matter of the culture and the industry that's here. You don't have companies like Boeing and BMW and Blackbaud and the technology corridor that's coming in and all of the creative innovation, economic innovation coming in if Charleston couldn't support that.
Right.
Because similar to my I'm out of here, this place is slow, no one from New York, New Jersey, California, or Germany is going to move a company division to a place that's not capable of supporting it. It's not going to happen. Right. They see a place where they can build, and they see a place that actually can sustain that growth. So Charleston is definitely a 21st century city. There is a lot of work to be done in areas such as education, definitely, around the state. And I think we can get there, but I think that this economic growth helps to push that forward.
Talk about the assets and the liabilities for the state as a whole to become that 21st century state.
Education has to be a priority. We cannot remain in the 40s in ranking. I think we're 43rd or 45th right now, and be able to provide qualified workers for these industries that are coming in. There has to be considerate, sustained focus on the education system. Not just brick and mortar and building a lot of new buildings, but really taking a look at what other cities have done to improve education standing for their children and make it happen. From a society point of view, also focusing on children, one of the things that I find difficult, and I've talked with some school groups here, is that the kids here, if you don't catch them early, get this sort of, they're lost. They don't feel like they're a part of the community.
Right.
And that carries on to young adults and to adults here because they don't feel like they fit. All of this is going on and happening around them, but we haven't found a way to tie them back, tie those kids into this new growth in the city. And so that's something that we have to work on as well.
Let's talk about race in South Carolina. I mean, obviously it's been the dominant influence on everything we've done from first day till this. How do you see race changing over your lifetime, and how much of that was a factor in your leaving and how much of it was a factor in your coming back?
Interestingly enough, and I've thought about it a good bit this week because I'm a board of director at the YWCA, and we're doing the Martin Luther King celebration this month, so I've been plugged into a lot of it. It's really made me reflect about that. I was really fortunate. I'm 40 years old. I was born in 1972. I went to Nativity, which is a Catholic school over on James Island, and I went to Bishop England. Race was never an issue that I can recall. It was never an overt problem growing up.
Really?
I never felt like I was different and cast aside because I was different because of the color of my skin. My parents never made me feel like I was different and I couldn't do something because I was black. So I never got that sense of, I can't go here, I can't do that, I can't participate.
Right.
And I really credit my parents with that. I'm sure they probably shielded me from a lot more than what was going on, but I never had that issue. And I can remember being in first grade at Nativity, and my new best friends, one of them was Courtney, and my other was Meredith, and we used to call ourselves Chocolate, Vanilla, and Strawberry. And that's how we saw race at that age. I never felt like there was a huge issue because I was black. And I think because of that, that barrier was never set in front of me, and I was able to do all the things that I did. I refused to allow that to be a barrier.
What about when you were at Clemson, and did it play any role in your decision to leave?
Again, at Clemson, were there kids who flew Confederate flags? Yeah. Were there some people who said some nasty things? Sure. Did I even let it sink in? No. Right. Just, they're ignorant, move on.
Right. But it didn't have any impact, any influence on your decision to leave leave South Carolina?
No, I left South Carolina because it was slow.
It was slow.
And I also wanted to get out of South Carolina to become my own person.
Right.
Again, being from Charleston with my mother's family and my father's family, which are both very large families, I always joke I'm related to the entire peninsula because I'm from here. So you couldn't do anything without someone saying, oh, there goes Mose and Sel's daughter. You were tied to who your family is, and I wanted to get out and explore who Kerri was.
Right.
So.
The next 3 steps, the next 3 things, you talk about education, but beyond education, what do we as a state need to do? Is the business community get up to speed? Is it the government, the state government? Is it the culture? Is it the psychology? What is it that keeps the rest of the state from becoming world class, do you think?
I don't know that I can give you what the next 3 steps are. I'll tell you the one thing that I have noticed and that has really weighed on me since I moved back. There's 2 types of segregation. There's overt segregation, there's subconscious segregation.
Right.
Laws are in place to put down overt segregation. And we're still fighting some of that today. If you look at the recent election cycle and the voter ID laws and all of these things that, our forefathers died to give us the right to vote and to not have to jump through all of these hoops and all of this, poll tax and Jim Crow era intimidation tactics in order to have the right to vote. So there's that. But what I think concerns me more is this subconscious segregation that we can't do that, or we can't hang out there, or we can't go there, or we can't achieve this unless somebody gives us permission to do it. And in the reverse of it is, you know, oh, well, they don't come here, so we shouldn't worry about that. Let me try to explain it a different way. A lot of people move down from the north and love Charleston and automatically get separated out into these two groups of social circles. And very rarely do they ever mix, which I find fascinating.
You mean the racial social circles?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Never had that problem in DC.
Right.
It may exist in DC, but my social circle was a melting pot. White, black, Asian, Latino, you name it, everybody hung out together because we were all bonded more on what our careers were.
Right, right.
Here, it still breaks down in a number of ways on race. So I will go to a number of places and I'm the only black person there and I can't figure it out.
Right.
That's probably been the most disturbing thing about moving back to Charleston.
You know, I do the same thing. I get an invitation to do something, and automatically in my head, it's binary. That's either a black event or a white event.
Right.
You
It's
know,
not just
I
an
mean,
event.
it's not just an event. I mean,
Right.
and I think a lot of that. I mean, I think it's interesting you talk about, you know, when you focus around a goal and your career, etc., then the standards by which you measure what you're doing is quality and competence and performance and expertise. But when you think about a society, it's about race and you know, et cetera. So, I mean, it's interesting that if we can, as a state, focus on those goals as opposed to focus on our social sort of laid back position, but instead focus on those goals, that, you know, that's an interesting observation, that's the way to sort of overcome a lot of that as a byproduct, but not necessarily as the goal.
Right.
Yeah, that's fascinating, yeah. Do you think that the politics of the state, in the sense that, you know, Jon Stewart called us America's political whoopee cushion. You know, it seems like we excel at embarrassing ourselves more than anything else. Do you think that has a substantive impact on our state?
In terms of continuing the perception that we just haven't advanced. Again, if you have folks people from the north who are like, you know, you guys are still backwards, you're still, you know, living in the dark ages down there. It doesn't help. Yeah. It does not help. This is
sort of my favorite question, and I've asked it of a lot of people. Assume for the moment that the great state of South Carolina in its infinite wisdom decided that you need to be queen. And we picked you up and took you to Columbia and put the crown on your head and proclaimed you Queen Kerri the First. And we as a state turned to you and said, okay, what will you have us do? What are the first three things you'd have us do?
That's a tough question. I think I would turn that job down.
You would turn the job down. Several people have said that, turn it down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't run for political office because I don't claim to know any more or less about how to make all this stuff better. I mean, that's why it's got to. That's the problem with the political system. Really, is that we all aren't talking to each other. Everybody just gets on their high horse and goes, "You're going to do A, B, and C." You know,
right.
Everybody else has their list of 3 things. I want to talk about it and see if we can collectively figure out what's the right thing to do. But if you asked me today to wave a magic wand, you know.
Do you think our political culture, you talk about that sort of divisiveness of everybody talking past themselves, and, you know, and in many ways we all take our cues from CNN. I mean, is South Carolina better or worse in that than other places in the country, you think?
No. I mean, I think most politicians today play to the camera. You know, they've forgotten that they're here to serve the people, and they play to the camera. You know, they want to see what talking points, they want to see what soundbite's going to end up on the news, they want to see what quote's going to end up in the paper, and they want to make sure that they keep their interests happy, that they're, you know, the people who are paying for their campaigns and lining their coffers are happy. It's unfortunate, but I think that politicians and the media have lost sight of who they're here to serve. It's the people.
You link the two, the politicians and the media. You know, the media is, I mean, the politicians are looking to figure out how they're playing in the media. What's the media looking for? What's their metric? Simply ratings?
Yes.
That's it.
I hate to say it, and maybe, you know, it's part of my burnout. I'm somewhat bitter and jaded, but I do think that at the end of the day, and I remember this from sitting in meetings, it's what's going to rate well. What are the advertisers going to pay for? You know, how do we make more money? The educational aspect, the information aspect has gone by the wayside. When you spend more time talking about Lindsay Lohan's latest escapades or drug arrest or what have you than what's going on in our country in terms of health care, or if you spend more time playing scare tactics about the fiscal cliff as opposed to really educating people about what all of this is going to mean to you if Congress and the president don't figure this out. It's because, you know, if it bleeds, it leads, and you've got to find some way to keep people whipped up in a frenzy because then they turn their TVs on, and that's what advertisers are looking for.
Do you see any differences within that social, political culture, including the media, in South Carolina and the rest of the country? I mean, you know, there's the great phrase and book, the Americanization of Dixie and the Dixification of America. I mean, are we still separate and distinct about anything important, or is it we've just become homogenized in this great blender and we have a funny accent and eat funny food, but you know, other than that, we're just like the guys in Kansas?
Or the guys in Texas.
Or Texas,
I was about to
New
say,
York
you know,
City or whatever. Yeah.
I don't know about New York City. I think that, you know, people still see us as the South. The South has tried long and hard to hold on to that Southern identity, and good, bad, or otherwise, Southern identity. And from a political standpoint, I think that because of a lot of the policies and because of our politicians, and that Southern identity is seen to be conservative. It's seen to be not terribly tolerant. And it's not just South Carolina. I think it's a Southern identity.
I read an article that was a sort of psychological survey, and they asked people, in your case, of the following terms that could be used to describe you: American, Southern, woman, or black, or South Carolinian. Which would you put first?
American.
What would you do second?
Black.
And third?
South Carolinian.
And fourth?
Woman.
What's left? Southern there.
No, Southern was second.
Southern was second?
No, I'm sorry. It was American, black, South Carolinian, woman.
Golda Meir always talked about she had more trouble being a woman than she did being Jewish or being prime minister. And I think it's interesting that question and about how people see themselves, and I mean, I think it's pretty stunning that race is sort of that far down on the list. So it's encouraging. But
well, you know what? It's interesting. I had a really great conversation with a Frenchman who I did some work with last year, and he said, you know, America more than anywhere else gets all caught up in these other labels about race when you're all Americans. And he's right. You know, at the end of the day, we're all Americans, so we should start there. you know, but I can't get away from being black. So I mean, it has to be number two.
Talk about as your advice for young people. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of young women in this state of all colors, and men as well, who say, I want your life. I want to grow up to be you. What would you tell them?
Well, a couple of things. The first one is no fear. Want to do it? Go do it. Right. What's the worst that can happen? You fail, you go try something else. No fear. Go do it.
Right.
You know, sky's the limit. You just have to be willing to apply yourself and do it. My father used to say to me, I can remember I came home from college when I was having a terrible time with, I think, chemistry or biology class, and he looked at me and he's like, if you want that, you have to go get it. If you want to succeed at it, you got to go after it. So that would be my first piece of advice, no fear. And the second thing I would say is, when you get there, help somebody else get there too.
Right.
It's, you want to have company. Right. Take somebody along for the ride. Yeah. I'm really happy that over the 16 years that I was in television, that I had an opportunity to meet and help so many young journalists get on the track to journalism. And I said the same thing to them. If you want to become, a correspondent, go for it, knock it out, travel the world, have fun. But remember to bring somebody with you. Remember to help somebody else onto the ladder and make a recommendation, or read somebody's resume, or watch somebody's tape. But you got to be willing to do it.
And the thing I found that's so interesting is that you never know. You never know what the impact you had on somebody. There was a young guy called me up the other day and said, "I want to come back and see you. I'm going to come see you." And he acted like he knew me, and I was trying to place him. I sort of vaguely knew the name, and he came and sat down, and I didn't realize it, but this guy had been an intern in my office for a very short amount of time, when we had a huge number of interns in the office. And he packed up and joined the Peace Corps and went to Central Asia and spent 2 years there. And it was like, and he came back and said, "I want to thank you for encouraging me to go do this." And I'm just getting old and maybe got early Alzheimer's. I don't even remember having the conversation with the guy. And, but you never know what particularly with young folks, are so impressionable. It's exciting.
Yeah.
But,
I did a speaking engagement at Sanders Clyde last year. They were having career days. Yeah. So I didn't talk about the work that I'm doing now. I talked about what I did in television. So I took, I had a stack of my photos from traveling all over the country with the presidents and what have you, and I passed it around. I talked to the kids about being a producer. 8 months later, I'm walking my dog down at the Maritime Center, and this kid walks up to me and he's like, "You're the producer." And I'm like, "Who is this kid?" I don't know this kid. "No, you talked to my class. You're the producer." And I had completely forgotten that I talked to Sanders Clyde, could not have picked that kid out of a lineup of a line of other children if I ever tried to. But it's amazing. You never know what you say that sticks. And that's why it's also really important to, watch what you say.
Are you optimistic about South Carolina?
Very, very. I love it here, and I want other people to love it too. I want my friends to love it. I want my friends to actually get out and explore more than they already do. I am always like, I'm the crazy one that's like, "Let's go to the beach. I know it's January, but it's awesome. Let's do it." Or, let's go. I try something new all the time. I am always out. I have friends who call me, "What's going on in town this week? What should we go see?" There's so much to do here. There's so much growth here. There's so many opportunities here. It's, it's not easy, but it's here. Right. And you just got to be willing to go out and get it.
And I think part of our great challenge is to figure out how to take that which Charleston has, and Greenville's got stuff, and a lot of little places have great stuff. A friend of mine, we were talking one time about Newberry, and he said Newberry is a great town. He said it's a little town, but it's great because of this and this and this. And I think if we can figure out how to sort of leverage some of that greatness from big to little and spread it a little more widely across the state, your optimism, I think, will bear a lot of fruit.
I think part of that difficulty is that it's some people are afraid of change.
Yeah.
And so if you want to go into a place and affect change, you can't do it with a bulldozer because you're going to shut everybody down. Right. It has to be well thought out, it has to be gradual, and everybody has to sit at the table and discuss how it happens.
Everybody's got to come along. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of building the state and its culture and its achievement is the nonprofit sector, and you're very involved in nonprofit stuff. Talk a little bit about what you're doing and how you think the nonprofit sector can leverage into this larger vision of world-class South Carolina?
Okay. Well, I'll start by talking about what my day-to-day duties are. I'm the Director of Institutional Advancement for the American College of the Building Arts, which is a small college here in Charleston, 45 students.
That's a small
it's
college.
very small. It's only been in existence for 9 years, and we teach the building trades. But we provide a liberal arts degree in the building trades. What makes it different than most trade schools is that liberal arts education. So the history, the English, the math, the drawing and drafting, that's all tied on to these hands-on skills. What I love about this college is that it is creating skilled workers, which are needed. If you look at the latest Bureau of Labor statistics in any of the segments that we provide, and we have 6 craft specializations, a number of those industries, masonry, plaster work, forged architectural ironwork, are losing workers because there's no one training them to go into those jobs. In a city like Charleston, where preservation is key, where Charleston is the foundation of the preservation movement in the United States, to have a college like this that is creating the next generation of artisans to do that preservation work, I think is phenomenal. I think we really serve a purpose for preservation for the country. We also serve a purpose in new construction because, again, we are helping to fill that pipeline for the next generation of innovative contractors, innovative architects, innovative artisans in the building trades. So that, to me, fits very much into this, South Carolina coming along as the 21st century city, because we are doing our part to help build the workforce. I'm also involved with the local YWCA over on Cumming Street. They have a deep history here in Charleston, particularly in dealing with women's rights and civil rights. And I've been on their board of directors for about a year. And a lot of the programs that we deal with are helping to motivate women and children and helping to provide support and education opportunities to help propel them to the next level. As I said earlier, if you don't catch kids young, you
Right.
just, you're going to lose them. It is really fascinating to walk into a school and talk to a group of kids between 1st grade and 8th grade, and you can watch the change in their eyes. And when you get to the 5th or 6th grade, you can just see the blank stare. If we
Right.
don't catch those kids, if we don't catch those girls and boys between 5th grade and 6th grade, we are not going to be able to have that, we're not going to be able to build that community that we talked about earlier. So I'm involved with the Y in order to affect change in those groups as well.
Your first, second, and third love in terms of the career stuff you were talking about earlier. Elaborate on that.
Okay. So my first love is research, which was why I was a pre-med major at Clemson, because I really loved biology and I just liked digging into the research. My second love was media, though, and that sort of eclipsed the biology, because I really just loved that medium of expression. And then third really became politics out of all of that. It fit the other 2 categories. So when I got to Washington, I was just enthralled by all of the things that I was learning every day about how our political system works and how things get done. I was teasing with a reporter I was on the phone with a couple of days ago working on a side project, and I said to him, we were talking about the economy in Wall Street, and he's like, well, don't ask me, you might want to call one of the New York guys. And I said, let me tell you something. New York thinks it's the center of the universe. Washington is the center of the universe,
Right.
because if Washington screws up, doesn't matter what's going on in New York.
Right.
And
Right.
that's fascinating to cover and fascinating to watch. And I think that people just need to know more about how Washington operates and why it operates the way it does, and get involved with making sure that it operates the way we want it to operate.
Right.
Instead of just being innocent bystanders, watching things go to heck in a handbasket.
Or watching the entertainment value of
Right.
talking heads versus about sports or talking heads about politics. That's my frustration is you turn the sound off and you can't tell what they're talking about.
That was a conscious decision. I can remember being in the meetings when those happened. And without calling names, I can remember being in cable and sitting in a room with executives who were talking about needing to make the shows more sports-like, because that's what people watch. People watch sports.
Right.
And if we don't make it more like sports, people aren't going to watch, and we need to sell television.
I mean, I think it was ESPN developed the 10 hot moments in 30 seconds or less, and then you turn on one of the cable news channels, they just ripped off the format. I mean, you're going, okay.
Oh, it's amazing. And what's really sad about it is that CNN suffered because CNN tried to
Right.
maintain the high ground and they got slaughtered.
Right.
I mean, I am still, I have a joke that I share with a friend of mine that works at CNN that we're like, okay, one of these days one of us is going to work for the other one. And I'm like, I'm going to work for CNN. I love you guys. I mean, because you're still
Right.
true to the form of what television was supposed to be. I don't know what's going to happen now that they're going all these changes, but they used to be the standard bearer, and they always, and still, if there's breaking news, everybody turns into CNN
Right.
first.
That's-
But
yeah.
when there's not breaking news, then you got to compete with the game shows.
Yeah.
Envision South Carolina, world-class, globally connected.